The Ecto doesn't appreciate the use of force perspective. The Ecto is back and modified, ready to compete against I don't know, its cousin, I guess? The stock electronics have all been completely replaced. The reedy 14-turn 540 motor replaced with a Hobbywing Fusion 1800. The stock servo replaced with an AGFRC 32 kilogram model, and an Airtronics MX6 taking over the transmitter duties. The truck called Daphne, once a TRX-4 Sport built from the kit, has had pretty much 80% of it replaced, as is the fate of most TRX-4 Sports. It's not 100% a fair competition here. As I said, at best these vehicles are cousins. The Sport here, running a Hobbywing 1080 for the speed control, a Holmes Hobbies Torque Master Expert in 21 turn. Servo Holmes Hobbies as well, SHV 500. I think I neglected to mention on the Ecto overview that it is now with the more aggressive front overdrive, and the Sport here is underdriven in the rear. So same effect, but without adding wheel speed. It should be an interesting comparison. A quick trip to the scales, and as usual, the TRX-4 being heavier at birth and much heavier after some parts have been bolted on, is sitting here just under 2 pounds above the weight of the Ecto, which, aside from electronics in those wheels, is pretty much factory stock. But let's see how they do. One of the joys of building your own course is you never really know how an obstacle is going to perform until it's done, and then it's either immensely frustrating, as in the case of this one, or it's just too easy and then you never go back to it. So you have this like 33% chance that something is going to work out really well, and then another third that you're just going to hate it and ignore it, or that third that it's going to be right in that butter zone where you're like, yep, it's just hard enough, it's not too hard. And this one definitely trends towards that. This is too difficult, I don't really want to do this all the time. Ride heights and other structural differences aside, they perform quite similarly. Not entirely surprising, they are both rock crawlers. The Ecto definitely more at home in this type of terrain that is smooth than the TRX-4. The TRX-4 is looking for rough ground to give it that advantage that portals will bring it. It's otherwise just trying to keep up. Continuing along here with the warm-ups a bit across the slick side hill portion here, which the TRX-4, as is in its nature, has a occasional issue with, but we'll give it another go, because driver error usually responsible for things like that. Nevertheless, that slope is close to what the TRX-4 wants to do. Dual stage foams helping quite a bit here, and very light body equally. The trick here is to navigate the side hill portion and then come around, and there's 3 gate markers, and to pass through the left hand side of the gate and then do a 180 and then back out through the right hand side of the gate. Not in the strictest sense, what the Sport likes to do. The lock differentials give it pretty boat-like turning radius at low speed. We get right through. By comparison, as in the little clip before, this is what the Ecto does particularly well, even on brand new tires that haven't had a chance to have their foams break in. The side hill is no problem at all, and as we'll see coming up here shortly, its low speed turning radius is quite a bit better. It hangs up in spots where the guy holding the controller can't remember to maneuver that front axle around sticky obstacles. But once it gets clear, it takes this much more cleanly than the TRX-4, and you can really see the sharper low-speed turning radius there. Easy for the Ecto. Now into what I would consider the competitive portion, where the two are going to face off head to head. This is 3 gates. Gate 1 being at the upper right-hand section, and then up and over the tunnel, through Gate 2 on the way down, and proceeding through Gate 3 at the front of the flat rock. I mean, it could be the tripod height. It could be a number of things. It doesn't really show how steep that surface is, as we can see there. It's really easy to roll over coming down this, and even the TRX sitting high has a real problem navigating this, and the angle of those 2 gates is just too tight to take without throwing it into reverse a handful of times, but gets through. I expected the Ecto to do as well or better than the TRX at this, and considering new tires and a relatively new driver, having only put a few packs into this truck, it does as exactly as well as I anticipated. It's just more nimble than the TRX-4, I think, geometry-wise, beyond even the weight. It will have its share of issues here. I don't count gate hits here. There's no judges. This is just, rather than just driving a line, how about we try to go somewhere specific? And that is a tough spot right there. Ecto working. Nope. Little save from the yard light. Another couple applications of reverse. That's good enough for me. Alright, on to basically the same sort of array. Gate 1 doesn't move. Gate 2 moves up higher into what I would almost consider an impassable position. That little chunk of curb there at the top is, as we'll see here in just a moment, is just a vertical drop, and it's an abrupt trip to the bottom if you don't get it just right, and I got it just wrong twice. The Ecto trying its hand at this harder upper line. It makes short work, hello cat, of the first portion, just as it did before, but center of gravity not a huge benefit up here. It just, I mean, if the tire comes off that rock at the wrong place, there's really no salvaging it, and I try to, but that's an impossible position. I'm not going to be able to reverse out of that, despite trying to do exactly that, and down she goes. Right into the second go at it for the Ecto. Little hang up there. comes through with no issues. It's done this a number of times now. This is where everything generally goes off the rails, and this time around is no different. Just pause for a moment and all the way to the bottom. Run 3, hoping for a different outcome. Not really expecting anything to come out differently. As per usual, gate 1, no problems at all. But we mix it up by just falling off the top of the tunnel into a hole. So Daphne will get her final run at it. Portal's there, clearing that face much more easily. I've had a couple tries at it now, so perhaps learning from my own mistakes, not straying too far to the right there. But if you get that tire into just the right spot and the weight doesn't transfer and you don't roll over, I'm not gonna say clean this, but keep it rubber side down to that gate. Passing it is passing it at this point. Just gonna navigate around that light. All in all, that wasn't bad. The sport definitely doing better here. Gonna dial back that relative level of difficulty a little bit here for the third round. 2 markers. Just have to pass in between them, the higher and the lower. Wrap around the top, kind of 180 around the summit there, and then back through the 2, like tying a bow. So the Ecto trying to figure out having to go first, figure out what line is what, and doesn't get it. So we'll give Daphne her shot at it. Always a little sticky right there. Coming around the top. That bigger steering radius. Again, an issue with any turn you're attempting to make that tight. But has made it past the harder part. A little reverse again. A little bit more reverse. Turning it into a side hill almost. Not the cleanest run, but manages. Second try for the Ecto, who has been particularly good at learning from its mistakes. Shoots towards the summit a little wider to avoid getting out onto that more sloped face. Brings it around. Thought it might be able to make it with no reverse, but it's too sharp. Rock sliding a bit. And then the little tip to the reverse. I think the Ecto did a better job there than the Sport, though. Moving into round 4, similar setup to what we saw in 3, just more difficult. Same thing, tying the bow. Ecto not happy with its first try. It doesn't even make it to the gate, so it's going to try entering from the right, which leads it into some steep stuff. And not a lot of traction down there at the bottom. But hey, oh, almost. Third try. Gonna come out real wide here. Doing this line the other way, starting from the left and looping around to the right is even worse, really, because then it's just sideways. Once the Ecto manages to get up over the big flat rock, it's no problem. It is very steep there on the backside. I have to some liberal application of reverse to get around that. With some more equipment, I think winching around that lion would probably be a better attack. Now this part right here, trying to get between that gate and that, it can't be done. So the Sport is going to do what the Sport does, which is do it just not altogether that cleanly. We've already run over the initial gate and rolled it out, but it powers up that rocky section with no problem at all. It's going to have to use more reverse than the Ecto, as it just behaves as like a truck that's 6 inches longer than the other one when it isn't. It's holding pretty well here. The drag brake on the brush motor is good. It's not as good as what that Hobby Wing can provide, but it holds the truck well enough. And I mean, does pushing the gate out of the way count as clearing it? I don't know. But it did do it on all 4 wheels, so I got to give it to him there. Round 4 is across the ridge, and this is definitely a high risk, high reward section. There are parts of the upper ridge that are narrower than the track width of the trucks. The only requirement here is to enter, to pass between the 2 gate markers, because that's a particularly off-camber section. And this, with this little knot of rocks by the fence post, is the toughest portion to navigate, as you'll see here. This is the high risk, high reward part of it. Yep. Little fuel tank confetti. If you're too far to the left here, it's usually all the way down. So the Ecto is going to take its first run at it. Hang up here, moving from dirt to concrete. No problem there. Gets to the thin part, and that lack of portals causes the driver to hang up on that rock, which puts it too far to the right. It's already right here. It's too far to the right, and I don't think it's salvageable, and it's not. But the Ecto gets a little bridge save, so it doesn't go all the way in. Daphne the Sport entering again, hoping to keep it more towards the fence side. But if you get too close to the fence, the wheel gets caught up in the fence and will also throw you in the pit. But she maneuvers through that easily, and once you're here to about the midway point, it's just a straight drive across. So the Ecto, not to be outdone, and having seen what line not to take and what line will work, as in the previous video with the Ecto, just does the same line in half the time that it took the Sport. Just powers right across the top like flat ground. Which brings us to the final round, I guess the back side of the tunnel in Drybone Valley. It's exceptionally narrow. There's a point in the middle where it's between 6 and 7 inches wide, and there's an overhang just big enough for a wheel to get inside of. Right there, there's no traction to be had. The wheels have to be in the exact right place, and the Ecto is sitting a bit narrower than the Sport. So I had presumed that this would be no problem, but there was no approach I could make where it would get enough bite on the driver's side to pull the passenger side up over the lip of that concrete. Every time it would get to a certain point, it was just stuck, and the weight would transfer over. Sometimes it was quicker, sometimes it took a little longer, But I gave it 3 tries to the Ecto, and I thought, oh, here we go. Maybe if we use a little bit of the chain link, I can try to pull it up. And I thought right here, it's probably got it, and it snapped away and down into the hole. So Daphne will take her run here at the very narrow section, and my hopes were not remarkably high after witnessing what the Ecto did. And then the Sport was like, this is what I do. Goes right to the top. Didn't miss a beat. Just to complete the victory lap. Descends the rough stuff. At the outset, I had thought maybe this isn't a fair comparison, because Daphne the Sport is what I would classify as highly modified. There's been a lot of changes made to this truck. But then I started thinking about it a little more. When we go to the tail of the tape, the Ecto really does suffer by being an RTR only. With what's included on it and what I put on it, we're sitting at about 715. Compare that to Daphne the Sport, who has a bunch of stuff on it, but a purchase price $120 lower, and we're sitting at around 850. So less than $150 difference between the two, and that 150 could easily be removed from the Sport. Some of it's cosmetic, some of the little stuff I might have forgotten on here and there. But if we're going purely based on price, we can't. I think out of the box, the Ecto outperforms the Sport. As these two are outfitted, I would consider the Ecto to be mildly modified, and Daphne the Sport is pretty much done. There's nothing else I need to do to it. The tires are broken in. It handles remarkably well. It's nimble for its weight. It can do things and go places that the Ecto, at least as it's currently configured, can't. So I didn't expect a different outcome, really. I thought that Daphne would take this, and I believe did. I think the Ecto has a way to go before it's competitive. And I know that there are some that will disagree with that, but I mean, that's a big part of why we're here. So, in the end, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.